Further, Mahamati said, Bhagavan, is it not because of the reality of words that all things are? If not for words, Bhagavan, there would be no rising of things. Hence, Bhagavan, the existence of all things is by reason of the reality of words. Said the Bhagavan, even when there are no corresponding objects, there are words, Mahamati. For instance, the hare's horns, the tortoise's hair, a barren woman's child, etc. They are not at all visible in the world, but words are. Mahamati, they are neither entities nor non-entities, but expressed in words. If, Mahamati, you say that because of the reality of words, the objects are, this talk lacks in sense. Words are not known in all the Buddha lands. Words, Mahamati, are an artificial creation. In some Buddha lands, ideas are indicated by looking steadily, in others by gestures, in still others by a frown, by the movement of the eyes, by laughing, by yawning, or by the clearing of the throat, or by recollection, or by trembling. Mahamati, for instance, in the worlds of the steady looking and in those of exquisite odors, and in the Buddha land of Samantabhadra, the Tathagata Arhat, fully enlightened one, the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas, by steadily looking without a wink, attain the recognition of all things as unborn, and also the various most excellent samadhis. For this reason, Mahamati, the validity of all things has nothing to do with the reality of words. It is observed, Mahamati, even in this world, that in the kingdom of such special beings as ants, bees, etc., they carry on their work without words. Thus it is said, as space, the hare's horns, and a barren woman's child are non-entities except as expressed in words, so is this existence imagined. When causes and conditions are in combination, the ignorant imagine the birth of this world. As they fail to understand this reason, they wander about in the triple world, which is their dwelling. At that time, Mahamati, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, again said this to the Bhagavan. Bhagavan, where dost thou pronounce sound to be eternal? The Bhagavan replied, according to error, Mahamati, since even to the wise there is this error, only that they are free from perversion. Mahamati, it is like the unwitted in the world who conceive a perverted idea regarding a mirage, a firebrand wheel, a hairnet, the city of the Gandharvas, Maya, a dream, a reflected image, and an aksha purusha, but with the knowing that it is not so, though it does not mean that those illusions do not appear to them. When, Mahamati, there is this error, diversities of forms are seen, though to this error the idea of impermanence is inapplicable. Why? Because it cannot be characterized with the ideas of being and non-being. Again, Mahamati, how are the ideas of being and non-being inapplicable to this error? Because all the ignorant take in varieties of situations like the waves of the ocean and the waters of the Ganges, which are not seen by the pretas, but seen by others. For this reason, Mahamati, the error existence of, or this world of illusion is not, but as this water is manifest to other people, it is not a non-existence either. Thus to the wise, the error is neither a perversion nor a non-perversion. And for this reason, Mahamati, the error in itself is characterized with permanency, having the nature of non-distinction as far as its own appearance is concerned. Mahamati, being discriminated as regards its diversified individual signs, the error is perceived as differentiated. Thus the error, as far as its own nature is concerned, is characterized with permanency. Again, Mahamati, how is the error to be considered reality? Mahamati, for this reason that as regards this error, the wise cherish neither a perverted knowledge nor an unperverted knowledge. It is such as it is, and not otherwise. In case, Mahamati, the wise should cherish any thought whatever in this error, it goes contrary to the reality attainable by noble wisdom. If there is anything at all here, it is the prattling of the ignorant, it is not the talk of the wise. Again, when the error is discriminated according to a perverted and an unperverted view, it gives rise to two classes of family, one of which is the family of the wise, and the other the family of the ignorant and simple-minded. Now, Mahamati, the family of the wise is divisible into three kinds, that is, the Sravakas, the Prajakabhutas, and the Buddhas. Mahamati, how does the Sravakayana family rise from the discrimination whereby the ignorant conceive the error? Mahamati, there is the rise of the Sravakayana family where the attachment to the notions of individuality and generality is kept up. This is the way, Mahamati. This error gives rise to the Sravakayana family. Mahamati, how does the Pratyekabudayana family rise as the error is discriminated? Mahamati, when in this error the attachment to the notions of individuality and generality leads one to a retirement from social life, there arises the Pratyekabudayana family. Mahamati, how is there the rise of the Budayana family when this error is discriminated by the intelligent? Mahamati, when the world is understood to be nothing but mind itself, the existence and non-existence of external objects ceases to be discriminated, and there is the rise of the Budayana family. Mahamati, this is the family, that is, what is meant by the family. Again, Mahamati, when the error is discriminated by the ignorant, there is the manifestation of varieties of objects, which calls forth the assertion on their part that this is so and not otherwise. Whence rises the family of the transmigration vehicle. For this reason, Mahamati, the error is discriminated by the ignorant as characterized by multitudinousness, and this error is neither a reality nor an unreality. Thus, Mahamati, this error being discriminated by the wise turns into tathata, suchness, with them, by virtue of a revulsion which takes place in them concerning the sita, manas, mano-vijnana, false reasoning, habit energy, the three svabhavas, and the 5 dharmas. Thus, Mahamati, there is this statement that tathata is mind emancipated. Mahamati, the meaning of this statement is here thus clearly expressed by me. That is, by the discarding of discrimination is meant the abandonment of all discriminations. So much for this statement. Mahamati said, Bhagavan, is the error an entity or not? The Bhagavan replied, it is like Maya, Mahamati, the error has no character in it making for attachment. If, Mahamati, the error had any character in it making for attachment, no liberation would be possible from the attachment to existence. The chain of origination would be understood in the sense of creation as held by the philosophers. Mahamati said, Bhagavan, if the error is like Maya, it will thereby be the cause of another error. The Bhagavan said, no, Mahamati, Maya cannot be the cause of the error because of its incompatibility of producing evils and faults. Because of its incapability of producing evils and faults. And thus, Mahamati, Maya does not give rise to evil thoughts and faults. Again, Mahamati, Maya has no discrimination of itself. It rises when invoked by the magical charm of a certain person. It has in itself no habit energy of evil thoughts and faults that, issuing from self-discrimination, affect it. Therefore, there are no faults in it. This is only due to the confused view fondly cherished by the ignorant regarding mind, and the wise have nothing to do with it. So it is said. The wise do not see the error, nor is there any truth in its myths. If the truth is in its myths, the error would be truth. If there is the rising of individual forms, nimitta, apart from all error, this will indeed be error. The defiled is like darkness. Further, Mahamati, Maya is not an unreality, because it has the appearance of reality, and all things have the nature of Maya. Said Mahamati, is it, Bhagavan, that all things are like Maya because Maya is something imagined and clung to as having multitudinousness of individual forms, or is it due to the correct imagining of individual forms? If all things have the likeness of Maya because Maya is something imagined and clung to as having multitudinousness of individual forms, then see, Bhagavan, things are not like Maya. Why? Because forms are seen in the multitudinousness of individual signs, not without due causes. If they ever appear without due causes, assuming the multitudinousness of individual signs and shapes, then they would be like Maya. For this reason, Bhagavan, that things are like Maya is not because they, i.e. all things and Maya, are both alike in being imagined and clung to as having multitudinousness of individual signs. Said the Bhagavan, It is not, Mahamati, that all things are Maya because they are both alike in being imagined and clung to as having multitudinousness of individual signs, but that all things are like Maya because they are unreal and like a lightning flash which is seen as quickly disappearing. Mahamati, a lightning appears and disappears in quick succession as is manifest to the ignorant. In the same way, Mahamati, all things assume individuality and generality according to the discrimination of mind itself. When the state of imagelessness is recognized, objects which are imagined and clung to as in possession of individual signs cease to assert themselves. Thus it is said, Maya is not without reality because it has something resembling it. The reality of all things is talked of in a similar manner. They are unreal like a lightning flash appearing and disappearing quickly, and therefore they are regarded as resembling Maya. Further, Mahamati said, now, according to the Bhagavan, all things are unborn and resemble Maya. But, Bhagavan, is there not the fault of contradiction between the previous statement and the later one? It is asserted by thee that all things are unborn is due to their having the nature of Maya. The Bhagavan replied, Mahamati, when all things are asserted to be unborn because of their having the nature of Maya, there is no fault of contradiction between my previous statement and my later one. Why? Because birth is no birth when it is recognized that the world that presents itself before us is no more than mind itself. And as to all external objects of which we state that they are or are not, they are to be seen as non-existent and unborn. And thus, Mahamati, there is here no fault of contradiction between my previous statement and my later one. But, Mahamati, in order to cast aside the philosopher's thesis on birth by causation, it is asserted that all things are like Maya and unborn. Mahamati, the philosophers who are the gathering of the deluded, foster the notion of deriving the birth of all things from that of being and non-being, and fail to regard it as caused by the attachment to the multitudinousness which rises from the discrimination of the mind itself. Mahamati, no fear rises in me by making this statement. In this light, Mahamati, the term unborn is to be understood. Again, Mahamati, the teaching that all things exist is given in order to admit transmigration, to check nihilism which says nothing is, and to make my disciples accept the doctrine that asserts the reality of karma in various forms and birth in the various worlds. For by admitting the terminology of existence, we admit transmigration. Mahamati, the teaching that all things are characterized with the self-nature of Maya is meant to make the ignorant and simple-minded cast aside the idea of self-nature in anything, as they cherish the thoughts characterized with error, as they do not clearly grasp the meaning of the world, which is no more than mind itself. They imagine and cling to causation, work, birth, and individual signs. In order to check this, I teach that all things are characterized in their self-nature with the nature of Maya and a dream. Attached to erroneous thoughts, they contradict both themselves and others by not seeing all things as they really and truly are. Mahamati, to see all things as they really and truly are means to realize that there is nothing to be seen but mind itself. So it is said, in the theory of no birth, causation is not accepted, as is maintained by the ignorant. Where existence is accepted, transmigration prevails. Seeing that all things are like Maya, etc., one does not discriminate individual signs. Further, Mahamati, we will explain the characteristics of name body, the sentence body, and the syllable body. For when name body, sentence body, and syllable body are well understood, the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas conformable to the signification of a sentence in a syllable will quickly realize supreme enlightenment, and thereby awaken all beings to it. Mahamati, by name body is meant the object depending on which a name obtains. The body is this object. In another sense, the body means substance, sarira. Mahamati, this is the body of a name. By the body of a sentence is meant what it signifies, the real object determining its sense definitely. In another sense, it completes its reference, Mahamati. This is my teaching as regards the sentence body. By the syllable body is meant that by which names and sentences are indicated. It is a symbol, a sign. In another sense, it is something indicated. Again, Mahamati, the sentence, pada, body, means the completion of the meaning expressed in the sentence. Again, Mahamati, a name or a letter, nama, means each separate letter distinguished as to its self-nature, from A to Ha. Again, Mahamati, a syllable, Vyanjana, is short, long, or lengthy. Again, Mahamati, regarding the sentence, pada, body, the idea of it is obtained from the footprints left on the ground by elephants, horses, people, deer, cattle, cows, buffaloes, goats, rams, etc. Again, Mahamati, names, nama, and syllables, Vyanjana, belong to the four skandhas, which, being formless, are indicated by names. Thus are names made. By means of the differently characterized names, there are syllables, Vyanjana. Thus are syllables made. This, Mahamati, is the meaning of the body of a name, nama, a sentence, pada, and a syllable, Vyanjana. You should endeavor to have a thorough understanding of these terms. It is thus said. Because of the distinction between nama, pada, and Vyanjana, the ignorant, the dull-witted, stick to them like the elephant in deep mud. Further, Mahamati, in the time to come, those wrong-headed ones who are inclined to false speculations owing to their deficiency of knowledge concerning truth and cause may be asked by the wise regarding that which is liberated from the dualistic conceptions of things such as oneness and otherness, bothness and not bothness. And thus asked, they may answer, saying, "It is no question, it is not at all properly put, that is to say, the question, are form, etc., and transiency to be considered one or different?" In the same way, nirvana and the skandhas, indices and indicated, qualities and qualified, realities and the elements, seen and seeing, dust and atoms, knowledge and the yogins, are these to be considered one or different? Such questions concerning the various aspects of existence lead successively from one thing to another without end, and those who are asked about these unexplainable questions would declare that they were put aside by the Bhagavan as impossible to answer. However, these deluded people are unable to realize the meaning of what they heard from the Buddha, because of their deficiency of knowledge. The Tathagatas, Arhats, fully enlightened ones, do not explain these things to all beings because of their wish to keep the latter from the fear-inspiring phrases. Mahamati, these inexplicables, Vairayani, are not taken up for consideration by the Tathagatas in order to keep the philosophers away from their wrong views and theories. Mahamati, the philosophers may declare thus, "What life is that is the body?" Or life is one thing, body is another. In these they make inexplicable statements. Mahamati, entirely bewildered by the idea of a creator, the philosophers make an inexplicable statement, but that is not found in my teaching. In my teaching, Mahamati, discrimination does not take place, because I teach to stand above grasped and grasping. How could there be any setting aside here? But, Mahamati, to those who are addicted to grasped and grasping, as they do not have a thorough understanding of the world, which is no more than what is seen of mind itself, there is something to be set aside as inexplicable. Mahamati, the Tathagatas, Arhats, fully enlightened ones, teach the Dharma to all beings by means of the four forms of questioning and answering. As to the propositions that are set aside as inexplicable, Mahamati, they are made use of by me on some other occasions for those whose senses are not yet fully matured. But for those of matured senses there is nothing to set aside. Further, Mahamati, all things being devoid of doing and doer are unborn. As there is no doer, all things are therefore said to be unborn. Mahamati, all things are without self-nature. Why? Because, Mahamati, when they are examined by self-knowledge, there are no such signs obtainable which characterize them with individuality and generality. Therefore all things are said to have no self-nature. Again, Mahamati, in all things there is no taking birth, no going out. Why? Because, Mahamati, the signs of individuality and generality are seen as existing, and yet they are not existent. They are seen as going out, and yet they do not go out. For this reason, Mahamati, all things are neither taking birth, nor are they going out. Again, Mahamati, all things are never annihilated. Why? For this reason, that the individual signs that make up the self-nature of things are non-existent, and all things are beyond reach. Therefore all things are said to be never to be annihilated. Again, Mahamati, all things are not eternal. Why? Because the rising of individual signs is characterized with non-eternality. Therefore, all things are said not to be eternal. Again, Mahamati, all things are eternal. Why? Because the rising of individual signs is no rising and is non-existent, and all things are eternal because of their non-eternality. Therefore, Mahamati, all things are said to be eternal. Thus it is said. The four kinds of explanation are direct statement, questioning, discernment, and setting aside, whereby the philosophers are kept away. The Sankhya and Vaishika philosophers teach birth from a being or from a non-being. All that are proclaimed by them are the inexplicables. When the self-nature of all things is examined by knowledge, it is beyond reach. Therefore they are without self-nature and unattainable. At that time Mahamati, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, again said this to the Bhagavan. Pray tell me, Bhagavan, regarding the stream entered and their special attainment which characterizes the state of the stream entered, whereby I and other Bodhisattva Mahasattvas thoroughly becoming acquainted with the stream entered and their special attainment characterizing the state of the stream entered, will proceed to know the means and conduct which characterizes the state of the once returning, never returning, and arhatship, and they will then explain the Dharma to all beings in this manner. Having understood the twofold form of egolessness, and having cleansed themselves of the twofold hindrance, they will by degrees go through the stages of bodhisattvahood, each of which has its own characteristics, and attaining to Tathagatahood, whose special realm is beyond conceivability, they will be like a multicolored gem, and will accomplish what is good for the lives of all beings, providing them with every teaching, condition, deportment, body, and enjoyment. Replied the Bhagavan, Listen well, Mahamati, and take well to heart. I will tell you. Mahamati, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, answering him, said, Very well, Bhagavan. The Bhagavan then said this. Mahamati, in the fruit attained by the Sravakas, 3 kinds are distinguishable. What are the 3? They are graded, Mahamati, low, middle, and the highest. The low ones will be reborn 7 times when their existence will come to an end. The middling will attain nirvana in 3 or 5 births. The highest will attain nirvana in this birth. Mahamati, for these 3 classes of the stream entered, there are 3 kinds of knots, weak, middling, and strong. What are these 3 knots, Mahamati? They are the view of an individual personality, doubt, the holding on to moral practices. Mahamati, when all these 3 knots are in succession promoted to the higher stage, then will be the attainment of arhatship. Mahamati, there are 2 kinds of the view of an individual personality, that is, the inborn one, the one due to false imagination. It is like the relation between the relativity view and the false imagination of the 3 svabhas. For instance, Mahamati, depending on the relativity view of things, there arise varieties of attachments to the false imagination. But this existence is neither a being nor a non-being, nor a being and non-being. It is not a reality because of the false imagination, and being discriminated by the ignorant assumes varieties of individual signs to which they are strongly attached, just as the deer does to a mirage. Mahamati, this is the view of an individual personality, falsely imagined by the stream entered, which has been accumulated for a long time by their ignorance and attachment. This is destroyed when the egolessness of a person is attained, by which the clinging ceases. Mahamati, the inborn view of an individual personality as held by the stream entered is destroyed in this way. When this body, which belongs equally to each of us, is considered, it is perceived that it consists of form and the other 4 skandhas, that form takes its rise from the elements and their belongings, that the elements are mutually conditioning, and that hence there is no aggregate known as form. When thus the stream entered realized that the idea of being and non-being is a partial view of truth, the view of individual personality is destroyed. When the view of individual personality is thus destroyed, covetousness will never assert itself. This, Mahamati, is what characterizes the view of individual personality. Again, Mahamati, as regards the nature of doubt, when the Dharma is attained and realized and thoroughly understood as to its characteristics, and when the twofold view of individual personality is destroyed as previously described, no doubt is cherished in the teaching of the Buddhas. And there is no thought in the minds of the stream-entered to follow the lead of any other teacher because of the difference between purity and non-purity. This, Mahamati, is what is meant by doubt discarded by the stream-entered. Again, Mahamati, how is it that the stream-entered do not hold themselves to the morality? They do not because they clearly see into the nature of suffering wherever they may be reborn. What is meant by the holding? Mahamati, that the ignorant and simple-minded observe the rules of morality, piety, and penance is because they desire thereby to attain worldly enjoyments and happinesses. They cherish the hope of being born in agreeable conditions, and the stream-entered do not hold to the rules of morality, for their thoughts are turning only toward the exalted state of self-realization, and the reason why they devote themselves to the details of morality is that they wish to master such truths as are in conformity with non-discrimination and undefiled outflows. This, Mahamati, is the way in which the stream-entered ones hold to morality and piety. Mahamati, by thus breaking up the three knots, the stream-entered will discard covetousness, anger, and folly. Mahamati said, "How many kinds of covetousness are taught by the Bhagavan? Which one of them is to be cast aside?" The Bhagavan replied, "The world where love grows, i.e., the desire for sexual embrace, showing itself in beating, slapping, suggesting, kissing, embracing, smelling, looking sideways, or gazing, may give one momentary pleasures, but is productive of future grief. With the stream entered, there is no greed for such. Why? Because they are abiding in the bliss of samadhi which they have attained. Hence this casting aside, but not of the desire for nirvana." Again, Mahamati, what is the fruit of the ones returning? There is once in them the discrimination of forms, signs, and appearances, but as they learn not to view individual objects under the aspects of qualified and qualifying, and as they know well what marks the attainment of the dhyana, they once come back into the world, and putting an end to suffering, realize nirvana. Hence the appellation once returning. Again, Mahamati, what is meant by never returning? It means that while there is yet the viewing of individual objects is characterized by being and non-being in the past, present, and future, the discrimination does not return with its errors and faults. The dormant passions do not assert themselves, and the knots are completely cut off, never to return. Hence the appellation never returning. Again, Mahamati, the Arhat is one who has attained the dhyanas, samadhis, emancipations, powers, psychic faculties, and with whom there are no more passions, sufferings, and discriminations. Hence the appellation Arhat. Mahamati said, "Now the Bhagavan declares that there are three kinds of Arhats. To which of the three is the term Arhat to be applied? To one who makes straight way for the path of cessation, or to one who neglects all his accumulated stock of merit for the sake of his vow to enlighten others, or to one who is a form of the transformation Buddha?" Replied the Bhagavan, "Mahamati, the term Arhat applies to the Sravaka who makes straight way for the path of cessation, and to no others. Mahamati, as for the others, they are those who have finished practicing the deeds of a bodhisattva. They are forms of the transformation Buddha. With skillful means born of their fundamental and original vows, they manifest themselves among the multitudes in order to adorn the assemblages of the Buddhas. Mahamati, here in these paths and abodes of existence, they give out varieties of teachings which are based on discrimination. That is to say, as they are above such things as the attainment of the fruit, the dhyanas, the dhyana practitioners or subjects for meditation, and as they know that this world is no more than what is seen of the mind itself, they discourse on the fruit attained for the sake of all beings. Further, Mahamati, if the stream entered should think, "These are the fetters, but I am disengaged from them," they commit a double fault. They still hold to the vices of the ego, and they have not freed themselves from the fetters. Further, Mahamati, in order to go beyond the dhyanas, the immeasurables, and the formless world, the signs of this visible world, which is mind itself, should be discarded. The samapati leading to the extinction of thought and sensation does not enable one to transcend the world of particulars, for there is nothing but mind. So it is said, the dhyanas, the immeasurables, the formless, the samadhis, and the complete extinction of thought, nirodha, these do not exist where the mind alone is. The fruit of the stream entered, and that of the once returning, and that of the never returning, and arhatship, These are the bewildered states of mind. The dhyana practicer, the dhyana, the subject for it, the destruction, the seeing of the truth. These are no more than discriminations. When this is recognized, there is emancipation. Further, Mahamati, there are two kinds of intellect. The intellect as an examining function, and the intellect which functions in connection with the attachment to ideas of discrimination. As for the intellect that examines, Mahamati, it is that act of intellect which examines into the self-nature of things, finding it to be devoid of the four propositions and unattainable. This is known as the intellect that examines. What is meant by being devoid of the four propositions? It means to be devoid of oneness and otherness, bothness and not-bothness, being and non-being, eternity and non-eternity. These are called the four propositions. Mahamati, train yourself to examine carefully all things as regard these four propositions. What, Mahamati, is the intellect which functions in connection with the attachment to ideas of discrimination? It is the intellect with which the mind is discriminated and the ideas arising therefrom are adhered to as real, and this adherence gives rise to the conceptions of warmth, fluidity, motility, and solidity as characterizing the gross elements, while the tenacious holding to proposition, reason, definition, and illustration leads to the assertion of a non-entity as entity. This is called the intellect that functions in connection with the attachment to ideas of discrimination. This, Mahamati, is what characterizes the two kinds of intellect in accordance with which the bodhisattvas, thoroughly mastering the signs of egolessness of persons and things, and by means of knowledge of imagelessness, becoming conversant with the stage of examination and practice, will attain the first stage of bodhisattvahood and acquire 100 dhyanas. Attaining the excellent samadhis, they will see 100 Buddhas and bodhisattvas, will enter into 100 kalpas that were prior to the present, and also into those that will follow the present. They will illuminate 100 Buddha lands, and illuminating 100 Buddha lands, they will understand the signs belonging to the higher stages. And by virtue of the most exalted vows, they will manifest wonderful powers. They will be baptized by the Buddhas when they reach the stage of Dharmamegha, law cloud. And realizing the inmost realm of the Tathagatas, they will be provided with things which are closely connected with the 10 inexhaustible vows. And in order to bring all beings into maturity, they will shine out in various forms with the rays of transformation. They will be quite absorbed in the bliss of self-realization. Further, Mahamati, the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas are to be well acquainted with the primary and secondary elements. How do the Bodhisattvas know the primary and secondary elements? Mahamati, the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas are to know this, that the truth is that the primary elements have never come into existence, and that, Mahamati, these elements are unborn. Thus understood, there is nothing in the world but what is discriminated by our imagination. When it is recognized that the visible world is no more than mind itself, external objects cease to be realities, and there is nothing but what is discriminated by the mind and perceived as external. That is to say, let it be understood that the triple world has nothing to do with the primary and secondary elements, that it is far removed from the four propositions and philosophical systems, that it has nothing to do with a personal ego and what belongs to it, and that it establishes itself in the abode of real reality, where it is seen in its own form, i.e., in its unborn state. Mahamati, what is meant by the elements derived from the primary elements? The element discriminated as vasticity produces the realm of water, inner and outer. The element discriminated as energy produces the realm of fire, inner and outer. The element discriminated as motility produces the realm of air, inner and outer. The element discriminated as divisibility of form gives birth to the realm of earth together with space, inner and outer. Because of the attachment to the incorrect truths, there is the aggregation of the 5 skandhas giving rise to the elements, primary and secondary. Again, Mahamati, the vijnana has its cause in our attachment to and the desire for multitudinousness of statements and objective fields, and it continues to evolve in another path of existence. Mahamati, the secondary elements such as earth, etc., are said to have their cause in the primary elements, which, however, are non-existent. Because, Mahamati, of things endowed with being, characteristics marks perceivableness, abode, and work, one can say that they are born of the combination of various effect-producing elements, but not of things which are devoid of characteristic marks. For this reason, Mahamati, the elements primary and secondary are the discriminations of the philosophers and not mine. Further, Mahamati, I will explain what characterizes the self-nature of the skandhas. Mahamati, what are the 5 skandhas? They are form, sensation, thought, confirmation, and consciousness. Mahamati, 4 of these have no material forms: sensation, thought, confirmation, and consciousness. Form, Mahamati, belongs to what is made of the 4 primary elements, and these elements differ from one another in their individual signs. But the 4 skandhas that are without form cannot be reckoned as 4. They are like space. For instance, Mahamati, space cannot be numbered. It is due to our discrimination that it is designated as such. In the same way, Mahamati, the skandhas that are beyond calculability, as they have no number marks, are not to be predicated as existing and non-existing, and are beyond the 4 propositions, but to the ignorant they are described as subject to numeration, but not to the wise. Again, Mahamati, by the wise, the 5 skandhas are regarded as thought constructions, devoid of dualities such as otherness and not otherness, for they are like varieties of forms and objects in a vision, like images and persons in a dream. As they have no better substance for their support, and as they obstruct the passage of noble wisdom, there is what is known as the skandha discrimination. This, Mahamati, is what characterizes the self-nature of the skandhas. This discrimination must be discarded by you. Having discarded this, you should declare the truth of solitude. Keeping back the views held by the philosophers, the truth of solitude is to be announced in all the Buddha assemblies, Mahamati, and thereby the teaching of the egolessness of things is purified, and you will enter upon the stage of far-going, Duramgama. Entering upon the stage of Duramgama, you will become the master of many samadhis, and attaining the will body, you will realize the samadhi known as Mayopama, Maya-like. Thoroughly conversant with the powers, psychic faculties, and self-control, you will be the supporter of all beings like the earth. Mahamati, as the great earth is the supporter of all beings, so is the Bodhisattva Mahasattva the supporter of all beings. Further, Mahamati, there are 4 kinds of nirvana. What are the 4? They are nirvana, which is attained when the self-nature of all things is seen as non-entity; the nirvana which is attained when varieties of individual marks characterizing all things are seen as non-entities; nirvana which is attained when there is the recognition of the non-existence of a being endowed with its own specific attributes; and 4. The nirvana which is attained when there takes place the severance of the bondage, conditioning the continuation of individuality and generality of the skandhas. Mahamati, these 4 views of nirvana belong to the philosophers and are not my teaching. According to my teaching, Mahamati, the getting rid of the discriminating mano-vijnana, this is said to be nirvana. Mahamati said, does not the Bhagavan establish 8 vijnanas? The Bhagavan replied, I do, Mahamati. Mahamati said, if 8 vijnanas are established, why do you refer to the getting rid of the mano-vijnana and not of the 7 other vijnanas as well? The Bhagavan said, with the mano-vijnana as cause and supporter, Mahamati, there arise the 7 vijnanas. Again, Mahamati, the mano-vijnana is kept functioning as it discerns a world of objects and becomes attached to it, and by means of manifold habit energy or memory it nourishes the alaya vijnana. The manas is evolved along with the notion of an ego and its belongings, to which it clings and on which it reflects. It has no body of its own, nor its own marks. The alaya vijnana is its cause and support. Because the world, which is the mind itself, is imagined real and attached to as such, the whole psychic system evolves mutually conditioning. Like the waves of the ocean, Mahamati, the world, which is the mind manifested, is stirred up by the wind of objectivity. It evolves and dissolves. Thus, Mahamati, when the mano-vijnana is got rid of, the 7 vijnanas are also got rid of. So it is said, I enter not into nirvana by means of being, of work, of individual signs. I enter into nirvana when the vijnana, which is caused by discrimination, ceases. With it, i.e. the mano-vijnana for its cause and support, the manas secures its use. The vijnana causes the citta to function and is supported by it. Like a great flood where no waves are stirred because of its being dried up, the vijnana system in its various forms ceases to work when there is the annihilation of the mano-vijnana. Further, Mahamati, I will tell you about the various features of the false imagination, parikalpita, and when you and the bodhisattva mahasattvas are well acquainted with each of them in its specific form, you will get away from discrimination. And seeing well and knowing the way of inner realization by noble wisdom and also the ways of speculation by the philosophers, you will cast off discrimination such as grasp and grasping, and will not be induced to discriminate in respect to the multiple aspects of relativity knowledge, paratantra, as well as the forms of false imagination. What are the various features of the false imagination, Mahamati? They are the discriminations as regards 1. Words, 2. Meaning, 3. Individual marks, 4. Property, 5. Self-nature, 6. Cause, 7. Philosophical views, 8. Reasoning, 9. Birth, 10. No birth, 11. Dependence, and 12. Bondage and emancipation. These, Mahamati, are the various features of the false imagination. Now, Mahamati, what is the discrimination of words? That is the becoming attached to various sweet voices and singing. This is the discrimination as regards words. What is the discrimination of meaning? It is the discrimination by which one imagines that words rise depending on whatever subjects they express, and which subjects one regards as self-existent and belonging to the realization of noble wisdom. What is the discrimination of individual marks? It is to imagine in whatever is denoted by words the multitudinousness of individual marks which are like a mirage, and clinging tenaciously to them, to discriminate all things according to these categories: warmth, fluidity, motility, and solidity. What is the discrimination of property? It is to desire a state of wealth, such as gold, silver, and various precious stones. What is the discrimination of self-nature? It is to make discrimination according to the imaginary views of the philosophers in reference to the self-nature of all things which they stoutly maintain, saying, "This is just it, and there is no other." What is the discrimination of cause? That is, to distinguish the notion of causation in reference to being and non-being, and to imagine that there are cause signs. This is the discrimination of cause. What is the discrimination of philosophical views? That means getting attached to the philosopher's wrong views and discriminations concerning such notions as being and non-being, oneness and otherness, bothness and not bothness. What is the discrimination of reasoning? It means the teaching whose reasoning is based on the grasping of the notion of an ego substance and what belongs to it. What is the discrimination of birth? It means getting attached to the notion that things come into existence and go out of it according to causation. What is the discrimination of no birth? It is to discriminate that all things are from the beginning unborn, that the causeless substances which were not come into existence by reason of causation. What is the discrimination of dependence? It means the mutual dependence of gold and the filament which is made of gold. What is the discrimination of bondage and emancipation? It is like imagining that there is something bound because of something binding, as in the case of a man who by the help of a cord ties a knot or loosens it. These, Mahamati, are the various features of the false imagination to which all the ignorant and simple-minded ones cling, imagining that things are or are not. Those attached to the notion of relativity are attached to the notion of multitudinous of things rising from the false imagination. It is like seeing varieties of objects depending on Maya, but these varieties, thus revealing themselves, are discriminated by the ignorant as something other than Maya itself, according to their way of thinking. Now, Mahamati, Maya and varieties of objects are neither different nor one. If they were different, varieties of objects would not have Maya for their cause. If Maya were one with varieties of objects, there would be no distinction between the two. But as there is the distinction between these two, Maya and various objects, they are neither one nor different. For this reason, you and the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas should never give yourselves up to the notion of being and non-being. So it is said, the citta is bound up with the objective world. The intellect's function is to speculate, and in the excellent state of imagelessness, there is the evolving of transcendental wisdom, prajna. According to the false imagination, self-substance is, but from the point of view of relativity, paratantra, it is not. Owing to perversion, what is discriminated is grasped as real. In the relativity, there is no discrimination. Multitudinousness of differentiations is imagined as real by the ignorant, but being like Maya, they obtain not. Varieties of individual forms are discriminated as such, but they really do not obtain. To imagine individual forms is wrong. It puts one in bondage. They are born of mind due to false imagination of the ignorant. Based on the relativity, they are discriminated. The existence thus subjected to discrimination is no other than its relativity aspects. The false imagination is of various forms based on the relativity. Discrimination is carried on. Conventional truth, samvriti, and ultimate truth, paramartha. If there be a third non-entity, is its cause. The false imagination belongs to the conventional. When it is cut asunder, there is the realm of the wise. As to the yogins, there is one reality which reveals itself as multiplicity, and yet there is no multiplicity in it. So is the nature of the false imagination. As by the dim eye, a variety of objects is seen and imagined, while the dimness itself is neither a form, rupa, nor a no form, arupa, so is the relativity discriminated by the unknowing ones. As is pure gold, water free from dirt, the sky without a cloud, so is the mind pure when detached from the false imagination. Falsely imagined existence is not, but from the relativity point of view it is. Assertion and refutation are destroyed when one is freed from the imagination. If the relativity aspect of existence is, while the imagination is not, this means that there is a being apart from being, and that a being is born of a non-being. Depending on the false imagination, there obtains the relativity aspect of existence. From the conjunction of form and name, there arises false imagination. False imagination can never be perfect knowledge, nishpana. It is not productive of anything else but itself. Then one knows what is meant by ultimate truth, whose self-nature is purity. There are 10 kinds of false imagination and 6 kinds of relativity. In the knowledge of tathata innerly attained, there is no differentiation. Truth consists in knowing the 5 dharmas and also the 3 svabhavas. When the yogins thus comprehend the truth, he does not transgress tathata. According to the form of relativity, there are those names that belong to false imagination, and the various aspects of false imagination arise from relativity. When well pondered with intelligence, buddhi, there is neither relativity nor false imagination. Where perfect knowledge is, there is nothing dualistically existent, for how with intelligence can discrimination take place? Where perfect knowledge is, the existent cannot be qualified with being and non-being. In what cannot be qualified with being and non-being? How can there be 2 svabhavas? Because of false imagination, the 2 svabhavas are established. Where there is false imagination, multitudinousness of things is recognized, which being purified, the spiritual condition of the wise obtains. Where there is false imagination, there is multitudinousness of objects, which are discriminated under the aspect of relativity. If otherwise discriminated, one becomes attached to the teachings of the philosophers. What is imagined being subjected to further imagination? There are various views from which arises the doctrine of causal origination. When the dualistic discrimination is got rid of, there indeed is perfect knowledge. Further, Mahamati said, "Pray tell me, Bhagavan, about the one vehicle that characterizes the inner realization of noble wisdom, whereby, Bhagavan, I and other bodhisattva mahasattvas, becoming conversant with the one vehicle which marks the inner attainment of noble wisdom, may be established without depending on anybody else in the teaching of the Buddha." Said the Bhagavan, "Then, Mahamati, listen well and reflect within yourself as I tell you." Mahamati, the bodhisattva mahasattva, said, "Yes, I will, Bhagavan," and gave ear to the Bhagavan. Thereupon the Bhagavan said, "In accordance with the authoritative teachings, in which there are no discriminations, Mahamati, let the bodhisattva mahasattva retire by himself to a quiet, secluded place, where he may reflect within himself, not relying on anybody else, but by means of his own inner intelligence, in order to discard erroneous views and discriminations, make successive advances, and exert himself, to finally enter upon the stage of Tathagatahood. This, Mahamati, is the characteristic feature of the inner realization to be gained by means of noble wisdom. What characterizes the way of the one vehicle? I call it the one vehicle because thereby one recognizes and realizes the path leading to the one vehicle. How is this the path of the one vehicle to be recognized and realized? The recognition of the one vehicle is obtained when there is no rising of discrimination by doing away with the notion of grasping, and by abiding in the reality of suchness, yatha bhuta. Mahamati, this recognition of the one vehicle, except by the Tathagata himself, has never been obtained before by anybody else, the philosophers, Sravakas, Pratyekabuddhas, Brahmins, etc. For this reason, Mahamati, there is known as the one vehicle. Mahamati said, for what reason is it that the Bhagavan speaks of the triple vehicle and not of the one vehicle? The Bhagavan replied, because there is no teaching whereby the Sravakas and Pratyekabuddhas can realize nirvana by themselves, I do not speak of the one vehicle. Thus, Mahamati, the Sravakas and Pratyekabuddhas are disciplined, segregated, and trained in meditation according to the discourse of the Tathagata, whereby they are led to emancipation and not by themselves. Further, Mahamati, as they have not yet destroyed the habit energy, memory of karma, and the hindrance of knowledge, all the Sravakas and Pratyekabuddhas are unable to realize the egolessness of things and have not attained the inconceivable transformation death. I preach to the Sravakas and Pratyekabuddhas the triple vehicle and not the one vehicle. When, Mahamati, destroying all the evil habit energy, they realize the egolessness of things, they who are now free from the evil habit energy will not be intoxicated by the samadhis and will be awakened into the realm of no evil outflows. Now being taken up into a superworld, which is the realm of no evil outflows, they will gather up all the material for the attainment of the Dharmakaya, which is of sovereign power and beyond conception. So it is said, the Deva vehicle, the Brahma vehicle, the Sravaka vehicle, the Pratyekabuddha vehicle, and the Tathagata vehicle, of these I speak. So long as there is a mind making conscious efforts, there can be no culmination as regards the various vehicles. When a revulsion takes place in the mind, there is neither a vehicle nor one who rides in it. There is really no establishment of various vehicles, and so I speak of the one vehicle. But in order to carry the ignorant, I talk of a variety of vehicles. There are three emancipations, and in all things there is no ego-substance. Knowledge and passions are of the same nature. When one is emancipated, they are discarded. Like a piece of floating wood on the waves of the ocean, the Sravaka, obsessed with individual marks, is driven along the stream of existence. Though disengaged from the actively functioning passions, they, the Sravakas, are still bound up with the habit energy of the passions. Intoxicated with the liquor of the samadhi, they still have their abode in the realm of outflows. In this there is no course of finality, nor retrogression either. Losing himself in the attainment of the samadhi body, he is not at all awakened even to the end of kalpas. Like unto the drunkard who, being awakened from his intoxication, regains his intelligence, the Sravakas will have the realization of the Buddha's truth, which is his own body. End of chapter 2.